My stepson forgot his towel and stepped out of the bathroom only partially covered. Then he lost his virginity to see me langry and his father was not home. What we do. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The bathroom door opened with a soft click, and a trail of steam followed him out. He froze the moment our eyes met, me standing there by the hallway, holding a basket of folded laundry that suddenly felt far too heavy. His hair was damp, water glistening on his shoulders, and the towel slung low around his hips looked like it could slip at any second. Sorry," he stammered, his voice a mix of surprise and embarrassment. "I didn't know you were home." My heartbeat stumbled. I should have looked away, should have said something motherly, something normal, but instead, my gaze lingered for a fraction too long. The scent of soap and warm skin hung in the air, soft and distracting. He rubbed the back of his neck, the motion making the towel dip slightly, and the tiniest smirk tugged at the corner of his lips, as if he'd noticed my hesitation. "It's fine," I managed, my voice softer than I intended. "Just, next time, take a towel that actually covers you." He laughed quietly, a nervous, boyish sound that broke the heavy silence, but not the tension. The space between us felt smaller than it should. I could hear the faint rhythm of water dripping from his hair onto the floor, tick, 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 and the sound synced with the quickening of my pulse. He stepped closer to take the laundry basket from my hands. Our fingers brushed, just skin on skin, nothing more, yet it sent a spark straight through my chest. I drew in a breath, but it caught halfway. For a moment, neither of us moved. "Your hands are cold," he said quietly, almost to himself. "And yours are warm," I replied before realizing what I'd said. The air shifted again, heavier this time, full of unsaid things. I tried to step back, but the wall was already there. He hesitated, looking at me like he was seeing something he hadn't before, something forbidden yet familiar. From outside, the faint hum of passing cars reminded us the world still existed, but in that charged silence, it didn't feel like it did. And then, just as the towel slipped a little lower and his breath touched my cheek, the front door clicked. Someone had come home. He wasn't supposed to be here this week. His father had taken an unexpected business trip, leaving the house quieter than usual, and me, somewhere between restless and lonely. When my husband was gone, I often filled the silence with little routines: laundry, cleaning, tending the plants that never seemed to stay alive. But this time, the silence felt heavier, maybe because someone else was now sharing it. Ethan, my stepson, had moved in with us for the summer after college. I'd always seen him as the polite, quiet type, the kind who smiled more with his eyes than his mouth. But lately, there was something different about the way he looked at me, a kind of curious awareness that made me suddenly conscious of my own heartbeat. Dinner that night was quiet. The clink of forks, the hum of the refrigerator, and the faint sound of rain outside created a strange intimacy. He talked about his classes, his plans, his confusion about life, and I listened, really listened. Maybe because I remembered what it felt like to be young and lost, or maybe because the attention in his eyes felt like something I hadn't felt in a long time. My husband and I, we'd grown apart in ways that didn't show from the outside. We didn't fight. We didn't even argue. We just stopped noticing each other. The goodnight kisses had become polite, and our conversations were more about bills than dreams. Sometimes I caught myself longing for someone to just see me, not as a wife or a homemaker, but as a woman. Ethan, somehow, did. It wasn't intentional, at least, that's what I kept telling myself. The day after the towel incident, he stayed in the kitchen while I cooked breakfast. The smell of coffee mixed with the soft crackle of the frying pan. He leaned against the counter, his voice low when he spoke. "You always make it smell like home in here," he said. The words were innocent enough, but his tone wasn't. My hand trembled slightly as I stirred the eggs, pretending not to notice the warmth creeping up my neck. You should tell your father that, I replied softly. He smiled. I think he already knows. I just don't think he appreciates it like I do. The air between us shifted again, that same electric pull, unspoken and undeniable. I stepped away, needing distance, but even from across the room, I could feel his eyes on me. Maybe it was wrong. Maybe it was madness. But in that quiet kitchen, with rain tapping the windows and his gaze heavy with something unspoken, I felt alive again. And as thunder rolled in the distance, I realized this wasn't just about attraction, it was about everything we'd both been missing. The rain didn't stop that night. It poured against the windows in rhythmic waves, filling the house with the soft, restless sound of water, the perfect backdrop for emotions that neither of us could hide anymore. Ethan was in the living room, sitting on the couch, his eyes half lost in the flicker of the television. I should have gone upstairs, pretended to sleep, but something about the way he looked when he thought no one was watching made me pause in the doorway. His jaw tightened slightly whenever the show mentioned love or relationships, as if something inside him was stirring, something he couldn't voice. I stepped closer. You're quiet tonight, I said softly. He looked up, and in that moment, the space between us disappeared, not physically, but emotionally. Just thinking, he said, his voice low. About people who pretend they're fine when they're not. His words landed like an echo of my own heart. That's everyone, isn't it? I replied, trying to sound light, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. His gaze lingered. Maybe. But some people are better at hiding it than others. The silence that followed was charged, almost unbearable. The flickering light from the TV painted soft shadows across his face, tracing the conflict in his eyes, desire mixed with guilt, curiosity fighting restraint. I turned to leave, but then he said it. You and Dad, you don't even talk anymore, do you? I froze. That's not your place, Ethan. I know, he said, standing up slowly. But I see the way you look when he calls. Like you're somewhere else entirely. My throat tightened. Stop. But he didn't. He stepped closer, the faint scent of his cologne mingling with the warmth of his skin. You deserve more than being invisible, he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. My heart pounded so loud I could barely breathe. Every rational thought screamed to pull away, to end it, but my body stayed frozen, caught between fear and longing. Just then, thunder cracked outside, the lights flickered, and for a split second we were left in darkness, two silhouettes standing too close, both dangerously aware of what was about to unravel if either one of us moved. The storm had calmed by morning, but inside the house, the air was thicker than ever, charged with all the words we hadn't said. My husband's flight was delayed, meaning it would be another night before he came home. I tried to ignore what that meant, tried to keep the day ordinary. But the universe seemed determined to do the opposite. I was in the laundry room when the power flickered again, and the hum of the dryer stopped. Silence. The only sound was the low creak of the floor behind me, his footsteps. Need help? Ethan's voice came, soft but close. I turned, startled. He stood there in a gray t-shirt, damp from the drizzle outside, his hair tousled, his eyes steady on mine. I think the circuit tripped, I said, trying to sound normal. I'll check, he offered, crouching near the outlet. But as he leaned forward, the space between us became impossibly small. I could smell the rain on his skin, the faint scent of soap from his morning shower. My fingers brushed against his arm as I handed him the flashlight, and I felt that familiar jolt again, the one I'd been pretending didn't exist. He looked up at me. Neither of us spoke. Something shifted, not sudden, but inevitable. The kind of slow gravity that pulls two people closer without permission. He stood, still holding the flashlight, its glow casting soft light across our faces. The shadows danced over the walls as the silence grew unbearable. You don't have to keep pretending, he whispered, his voice shaking. I swallowed hard. Pretending what? That you don't feel it too. The words hung in the air like a live wire. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every inch of me wanted to run, yet every part of me wanted to stay. I can't, I said, barely audible. He took a step forward anyway. Then tell me to stop. But I didn't. The flashlight flickered again, throwing the room into brief darkness. When the light steadied, we were standing close enough to feel each other's breath, caught between a choice that could never be undone. And just as his hand started to lift, the front door creaked open. My husband's voice called out. Honey? I'm home early. The storm had calmed by morning, but inside the house, the air was thicker than ever, charged with all the words we hadn't said. My husband's flight was delayed, meaning it would be another night before he came home. I tried to ignore what that meant, tried to keep the day ordinary. But the universe seemed determined to do the opposite. I was in the laundry room when the power flickered again, and the hum of the dryer stopped. Silence. The only sound was the low creak of the floor behind me, his footsteps. Need help? Ethan's voice came, soft but close. I turned, startled. He stood there in a gray t-shirt, damp from the drizzle outside, his hair tousled, his eyes steady on mine. I think the circuit tripped, I said, trying to sound normal. I'll check, he offered, crouching near the outlet. But as he leaned forward, the space between us became impossibly small. I could smell the rain on his skin, the faint scent of soap from his morning shower. My fingers brushed against his arm as I handed him the flashlight, and I felt that familiar jolt again, the one I'd been pretending didn't exist. He looked up at me. Neither of us spoke. Something shifted, not sudden, but inevitable. The kind of slow gravity that pulls two people closer without permission. He stood, still holding the flashlight, its glow casting soft light across our faces. The shadows danced over the walls as the silence grew unbearable. You don't have to keep pretending, he whispered, his voice shaking. I swallowed hard. Pretending what? That you don't feel it too. The words hung in the air like a live wire. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every inch of me wanted to run, yet every part of me wanted to stay. I can't, I said, barely audible. He took a step forward anyway. Then tell me to stop. But I didn't. The flashlight flickered again, throwing the room into brief darkness. When the light steadied, we were standing close enough to feel each other's breath, caught between a choice that could never be undone. And just as his hand started to lift, the front door creaked open. My husband's voice called out. Honey? I'm home early. My husband's voice echoed down the hall, shattering the fragile stillness between us. Ethan froze, his hand still hovering near my cheek. The flashlight trembled in his grasp, and I could feel the panic in the air, raw, electric, alive. Go, I whispered urgently, stepping back. He can't see you in here. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his eyes held mine, unwilling to break the connection. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he slipped out the side door, disappearing just as my husband's footsteps entered the kitchen. There you are, he said, his tone casual, but his eyes scanned the room. Why's it so dark in here? The power's been acting up again, I managed, forcing a smile. My voice sounded strange, too calm, too steady for what I was hiding. He nodded, setting his bag down. I'll check it later. I'm starving. But as he turned toward the counter, his gaze caught on something small, a second coffee mug, still warm, sitting beside mine. He frowned. You had company? My stomach twisted. Ethan was helping me fix the fuse box earlier. That's all. He didn't respond right away. His expression hardened, suspicion flickering in his eyes like lightning on the horizon. "Right," he said finally, though his voice carried the weight of disbelief. The rest of the evening crawled by in uneasy silence. Every tick of the clock felt like thunder in my ears. When I went upstairs, I found Ethan's bedroom door slightly open, a thin sliver of light cutting through the hallway. I hesitated, then knocked softly. He turned from the window, where moonlight painted his face in silver tones. "He knows," Ethan said quietly. "No," I whispered. "He just suspects." Ethan stepped closer, his voice breaking slightly. "I can't do this anymore, pretending I don't care when I do. When I stop." I cut him off, my voice trembling. "You can't say it." "But it's the truth," he said, his eyes shining with a mix of defiance and heartbreak. "You make me feel alive. And I think you feel it too." The words hit like a confession I'd been running from. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. I wanted to deny it, to say it was just confusion, loneliness, anything but what it was. But then, from behind us, a voice spoke. "My husband's." I was right. We both turned. He stood in the doorway, expression unreadable, eyes dark with betrayal. No one spoke. The silence was deafening, heavier than any storm. And then, almost eerily calm, he said, "Maybe it's time we stop pretending to be a perfect family." The room seemed to tilt, the world spinning into chaos. What we'd hidden was no longer a secret, and nothing, from this point forward, would ever be the same. The silence after his words was louder than the storm itself. None of us moved. My husband stood in the doorway, his eyes shifting between me and Ethan, reading every flicker of guilt, every unspoken truth that now hung thick in the air. "Say something," he demanded, his tone low and trembling. "Tell me I'm wrong." But I couldn't. The truth was already written on my face. Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking. "It's my fault. I crossed the line." She tried to stop. "Don't," I said sharply, shaking my head. "This isn't just on you." My husband laughed, not with humor, but disbelief. "You think that makes it better? That you both share the blame?" He rubbed a hand over his face, pacing the room. "My own son and my wife, under the same roof." The air crackled with emotion, guilt, anger, heartbreak, all colliding in one unbearable silence. "I didn't plan this," I said finally. "I didn't even see it coming. But we've been broken for a long time, and you know it. You left me here with your absence, your silence, your distance." He turned sharply. "So that's your excuse? You felt lonely, so you reached for him?" Tears filled my eyes. "No excuse can make it right. But at least now, you're finally listening." Ethan stepped back, guilt etched into his features. "Maybe I should leave," he said quietly. "No," my husband said coldly. "You don't get to run. You'll face this." The tension was unbearable, like standing on the edge of something that couldn't be undone. My husband's eyes softened slightly, just for a second, and that hurt the most. Beneath all the anger, there was heartbreak. "I loved you," he whispered. "I know," I said softly, "and maybe that's what makes this harder." Ethan lowered his head. "I'll go stay somewhere else," he murmured. "I can't stay here after this." No one stopped him. The sound of the door closing behind him felt final, like the end of something that had burned too bright, too fast. My husband turned away, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "You'll hear from my lawyer," he muttered before walking out of the room. I stood there in silence, watching the faint light of dawn seep through the curtains. Everything that had been hidden was now exposed. Every truth, every emotion, every forbidden heartbeat, all laid bare. And yet, beneath the wreckage of guilt and consequence, there was a strange stillness in me. Painful, yes, but real. Because for the first time in years, I had stopped pretending. Some endings don't fade quietly. They crash, burn, and rebuild what's left of you. And as the morning light touched my face, I whispered to no one, maybe that's where freedom begins. The morning sun broke through the clouds after days of rain, painting soft gold across the quiet house. Everything had changed, the tension, the secrets, the sharp edges of guilt, all finally settling into a fragile kind of peace. Ethan had left the night before, and my husband hadn't returned. I thought that was the end of everything. But sometimes, endings have a way of surprising you. By evening, the sound of a familiar car pulling into the driveway made my heart race. My husband stepped inside, his expression tired but calm, not angry, not cold, just human. He looked at me for a long moment before saying softly, "We need to talk." We sat in the same kitchen where everything had begun, the one that once smelled of coffee and rain. The silence was heavy at first, then he sighed and said, "I thought about it all day. About us. About how far apart we've drifted. And maybe what happened wasn't just betrayal. Maybe it was a wake-up call." Tears filled my eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," I whispered. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine, hesitant, gentle. "I know. And I should have been here more, not just in this house, but with you. Maybe we both stopped trying long before this." Something in his voice broke me. Not in pain this time, but in relief, because for the first time in years, we weren't hiding behind walls. We talked for hours, really talked. About love, distance, mistakes, and the strange way people sometimes lose each other even when they're under the same roof. And by the end, we weren't two broken souls blaming one another. We were two people realizing that love, at its core, is forgiveness wrapped in understanding. When the clock struck midnight, he stood and said, "Maybe we can start over. Not as who we were, but as who we are now." I stepped closer, feeling the weight of every memory between us. "Starting over," I whispered, "means choosing each other again." He smiled, not the practiced one he used to give, but something real, something warm. His hand found mine, and for a moment, the world outside didn't exist. The past didn't matter. The future didn't scare me. As the night breeze slipped through the open window, I leaned my head on his shoulder, whispering, "I think love isn't about never breaking, it's about finding someone who stays to help you heal." And in that stillness, we held each other, not as two people bound by duty, but as two hearts choosing forgiveness, love, and a second chance.